My name is Alize Zorlutuna, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I'm a poet, cook, a pedagogue. Um, I'm the first generation in my family born on Turtle Island, and I've moved between Anatolia and mostly Tkarón most of my life. And for those who don't know where Central Anatolia is, that's present-day Turkey or Turkey. And my work is really informed by that movement between places. So I didn't come to art immediately or easily. I think I always wanted to be an artist, but it felt like something that other people did and not something my family was particularly enthusiastic about initially. My mother is now very supportive of my practice, but it's not generally the dream. You know, they wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor or something. So in terms of my educational trajectory, I studied Western philosophy and history at the University of King's College in Halifax. And then I studied international development, which really allowed me to learn about the world. I'm a student of history, so that's always been part of my journey, I guess. So in terms of my educational background, it took me some time before I came to going to art school. So I ended up going to OCAD University and studied sculpture installation there. And I dabbled in media and textiles and really explored a lot in terms of my practice. I originally thought I was a painter. It took some time for me to also come into how I work. I did my master's at Simon Fraser University in Coast Salish territories in Vancouver. In my master's work, I was really interested in researching and working through the movement of intellectual and visual and material and scientific knowledge and practice between the Swana region or the Muslim world and the West. And so that was how my research initially started, and then eventually kind of evolved into an exploration of the intersections of my queerness and my Muslim background and sort of how those intersect for me. I'm very interdisciplinary in my practice, and so for me that means working between a lot of different material practices. So you might notice behind me some things. Over here, I have some experiments right now. I'm at a residency, so I've been doing some research, development. So the work just behind me here, I'm working with Ebru, which is a traditional form of paper marbling in the Swana region. And I had the opportunity to apprentice with a master in Istanbul many, many years ago. And it's a beautiful material craft. I'm interested in working with or exploring sort of traditional material processes or technologies. I like to also use that word and then I'm trying to find ways to work with it in a contemporary way that speaks to the interstitial nature of who I am and where I find myself. I've also been developing work using my personal familial archive of objects. So I've been developing these arrangements of these objects. So for instance, that dangling thing behind me is the scarf my grandmother brought back from the Hajj. It's my father's knife. It's a necklace my father bought me, and mint from the garden here where I'm doing the residency, and mint from my bahçe, my garden. I'm really experimental with my work. And I think as I get more brave in my explorations, this playfulness is allowing me to develop some really exciting ways of working. And so you asked, how what my process looks like. I'm often, when I have space and time, like for instance, in this residency, having 2 weeks of time, when I have space and time, I tend to work on many different things at the same time. And so, I'm working on the paperwork, I'm sitting with my whole archive of familial objects kind of arranged in front of me. I bring a lot of things with me, and then I see what they want to be or do. And I find that there are certain themes or ideas that are at the root or the ground of my practice, and I return to them over and over again through different materials. Sometimes it's video, like I've done a couple performances for video while I'm here, working with a prayer carpet from which I've removed the niche or the center of the carpet, and I've laid it on the land and I've taken photos. So now I've done a performance, and then actually right to my right, I'm sort of playing with fragments of my grandmother's wedding dress, an image, like a photo of a landscape from the last time I was in Turkey, and the carpet. So it's very experimental. Sometimes these experiments gather into resolved objects or installations, and sometimes they're just part of my research process, I think. My ongoing series, Crawl, is a performance series where I crawl the steps of museums, art galleries, and educational institutions backwards, so feet first, either in the outside in front of the building or inside. The first crawl I did was at the Altes Museum in Berlin. I'd gone on a research trip in Europe looking for particular objects and artifacts from Anatolia that are in museums across Europe. And I can't really remember the exact impetus behind the first crawl, but for me, it's thinking through how those of us who are displaced from our ancestral homelands often access our own histories through the lens of imperial institutions, through museums, through art galleries. Then I crawled the Reina Sofia in Madrid. I crawled the stairs at the AGO. I really thought people would stop me, and no one stopped me. So I ended up going up that whole spiral. So that was a really funny surprise in a way. We'd strategized what's going to happen when they stop me. At the Reina Sofia, they didn't let me in, and a kind of crowd gathered while I did it. And so I kind of never know how that's going to go. So on the one side, there's crawling the stairs to museums and thinking about history and how we access our histories through the lens of a Western ideological framework. And then there's the educational institutions. I think that's also very clear for me, right? The ways that, again, we are learning our histories through the Western Academy, and what that perpetuation of colonial frameworks does in terms of navigating your own identity or your own curiosities. Crawling the contemporary galleries for me is really about the lack of representation in the art world and who gets to access those spaces and what it means to access them. There's so few women artists from the Swana region that are shown in Canada, in in the contemporary art world, though politically we're talked about all the time. And so I think that through this gesture, it's arduous, it's very uncomfortable. And yet I'm persistent in crawling as a disabled, fat woman of color crawling upwards, up the stairs backwards. You know, that has felt for me like a way I can communicate the embodied experience of being up against the institution and who gets in, who gets shown, and what those opportunities look like. And so this crawling is persistent for me, and I'll keep crawling until I feel we've made some shifts.
No, that's